Good morning or good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. We are having a special time today because our guest is coming from the West Coast, and we like to let them sleep in when they do that for us. It's our little way of thanking you. Our guest this morning is going to talk to us about a very important topic. We're going to talk about preventing as much as we can, trying to prevent substance use for our teens and tweens. Before we get into that, I just want to remind everybody that we are live on Tuesday at noon Eastern Time. So feel free, if you are joining us live, to post your comments and questions in the question section, and our guests will answer them live. And if you are not joining us live and you're watching a replay, we thank you for doing that. You're welcome to dialogue with other people who are watching the replay, but Pamela will not be available to address your questions then. I want to really get into this because we have some good information. Pamela has sent a lot of good information, and I want to make sure that you guys hear it. So before we start, I'd like her to tell us a little bit about herself and her work. And she has a book. I want you guys to learn about this book. And then we're going to get into that thing that scares us more than most things, and that is the thought of our children and substance use, be it drugs and or alcohol. But first, let's hear a little bit about Pamela.
Thank you so much, Kamara. I'm really excited to be here with you and all your listeners. I wrote this book, Conscious Bravery, because it's the book I needed 12 years ago that wasn't available. And I've been a clinician for over 30 years, a psychotherapist in private practice. And at that time, really 11 and a half years ago, my fairly new husband of 6.5 years died from grade 4 glioblastoma brain cancer. And my 2 teenage sons turned not to just each other and to me in their grief, but they turned to substances and alcohol as an answer to their pain. And of course, this is a thing that most of us parents fear. As you said, it's one of the things we fear the most. And I thought that as a psychotherapist and someone who'd walked alongside my clients and even family members for years, teaching and helping people with tools and practices to be aware and to face our emotions, I thought that I would have the skills under my belt to help myself and my sons. But that's the weird thing, Kamara. Sometimes grief and anxiety and panic hit us all at once, and they just kind of overtook both me and my sons, and they became addicted to stimulants. And within 3-4 years, they became addicted to methamphetamines. So anyway, I was scrambling for resources and doing different kinds of therapy, reading different kinds of books, and trying to find the things that really lay the foundation for how do we become brave when we're devastated and when substance abuse and mental health issues have landed in our families. And so that's what my book is about. Conscious Bravery is about tools and concepts to help us to take care of ourselves first and to know who we truly are so that we can walk alongside our loved ones if they're struggling, or our teens if they're having a rough time.
This is especially important today because in our current, I call it the COVID era, our teens and tweens are having more mental health issues than before. And those mental health issues can lead to substance use issues or vice versa, depending on how they come to this. And parents are really at a loss. And if they're not at a loss, they're seeing it happen. I personally have multiple people in my private life every month contact me, and never had this before. I've been in this parenting sphere for a long time now, and just in my private life, not even dealing with the Your Teen Media aspect of my life, and their families are in crisis or worried that a crisis is on the horizon. So what we're hoping to do is give them some instructions on what you can do to prevent that crisis.
Absolutely. I love this subject. And one of the most, it's kind of an interesting answer, and there are multiple answers, but this book I love, The Conscious Parent.
Okay.
By Shefali Sabari. She says that one of the most valuable lessons that we can teach our children is that life is about the unfolding of the conscious self. So one of the answers I've helped parents find for themselves with their teens over all these years is to first know who we truly are and to be able to handle our tough emotions. So anyone listening, if you have anxiety, learn to manage your anxiety. And we can talk about exactly how. If you have fears and panic, your teens will see it. And the best gift you can give them is to know consciously how to face it and come at your own pain or anxiety or depression with compassion and take steps to manage it without substances yourself. Because that helps our teens, especially like you're saying, post the pandemic, because I work with parents primarily, not with teenagers. I work with those of us that are on this, or that are listening. And everyone probably knows that we all turned more than ever before to substances and behaviors to sort of soothe ourselves during the pandemic. So many of the parents I still work with are saying, I started drinking 3 glasses of wine a night and I'm still doing it. And so I try to lovingly help them find other soothing practices and comforting measures that actually help them get that dopamine hit that they need. And that's really part of it for our teens. If we can role model for them how to be aware of our own behaviors, our own use of substances and stuff, and do healthier things instead. Go for walks, get out in nature, use things like I keep a dish of stones in my office, which may seem really silly, but they're smooth stones. And if you keep one in your pocket or you just hold it, it can be so soothing. And so I teach the power of the pause for ourselves, and then we can teach it to our teens so that we pause and consciously breathe into our experience, so that right now, when we're still kind of sort of coming out of this pandemic, we can know what is still alerting us, what we're still afraid of and concerned about, and we can manage our emotions, manage our discomfort, and learn to become more comfortable with our discomfort rather than turning to unhealthy behaviors or substances ourselves.
Okay, so what I just heard is that we must model self-management. And then when we're modeling self-management, pay close attention to the power of the pause.
Yes, absolutely. And so a primary tool that we can begin with today is how to notice when we're disrupted, or we're feeling anxious, or maybe we're feeling blue or fearful. And we notice that maybe it's first thing in the morning before our workday, right, Kamira? Because so many of us just have to kind of begin our days, know where we are, and then hopefully shift from that place of, wow, I'm feeling fearful or anxious, to, I'm going to pause, consciously breathe, not just take 3 deep breaths. That's very temporary. But conscious breathing means we breathe into our whole being with awareness. We breathe into our bodies, breathe into our hearts, breathe into our racing minds or our fears or our beliefs. Breathe into some part of our intuition even that might be saying, hey, something is amiss. I don't know what it is yet. Maybe we tap into that and we tune into the deepest core part of ourselves, like the Conscious Parent book talks about. We tap into who we really are for anchoring. And then we tune into the energy around us, because our kitchen might be vibing with some sort of energy, maybe depressed energy from our teens or our other family members. So we tap into that, we become aware, and we pause. And instead of going, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out, or I'm going to have a bad day, and labeling what is about to happen, we stop, pause, and be present right here, right now, and consciously breathe and tune into our experience without judging it. And that is the magic for helping to prevent teen substance use too, because if they can learn how to do that when they're with their peers, at school, in situations, out at night, with friends, in unexpected places or things happening, they can pause and tap in and say, now there's this. Okay, I'm listening to what I'm experiencing. I'm listening to myself. Now what will I do? And we all make decisions more consciously when we can pause and listen to the data that our own beings are offering to us.
So there's two things that I got from that. One is while we're doing that, we should be explaining it to our teens, not just modeling it and all of a sudden becoming Zen, as we like to
Yes.
say in our house, but explaining why and how we've gotten to this state and the difference that it makes, because they won't automatically know to model this if we don't show them the steps. And then the other thing I got is if you do this and you present yourself in such a calm way that you notice everything that's going around, then maybe you can notice that something is off with your teen, or maybe you can notice that your teen is going in a direction that you want to prevent, something that you may have missed if you had not achieved this calmer state of mind.
Beautifully said. Yes, absolutely. So, yes, we often don't remember that we can talk about what's happening as it's happening, our own
Mhm.
experience, rather than pointing out to our teens who get really turned off if we say, "Gosh, you look really upset.
Mhm.
What's happening?" If we say with calmness and kind of an invitation, you're kind of moving your hands a lot. "What's going on, hun?"
Mhm.
You know, if our teens kind of have anxious habits, some of us pick our fingernails or our cuticles, or, you know, so we can role model. Hey, I noticed that I was really moving my hair a lot this morning, and I realized I'm feeling anxious. And we just say
Mhm.
that. Then it's a door that we're opening to our teens to see we're aware of our own experience. Or we can tell a story. Like, I was out with a friend and I noticed that they were fidgeting a lot. And I was looking at myself and I was realizing I was fidgeting more. And I realized we were both kind of anxious about the place we were. It was loud and we couldn't really talk to each other very easily. And so we just left and went outside for a walk, and that calmed us both down. And so even telling little stories about our own experience helps our teens know we're not perfect. We're using our awareness to change our situations. And so that can play into them learning how to do that too. And that leads to a next thing in terms of prevention of
Mhm.
substance use. We want to have at a very early age, when our teens are preteens, if we can do this, we want to have a really open relationship with them that's consciously aware, safe,
Mhm.
and secure, so that our teens feel like they can tell us the truth,
Mhm.
which they're not going to be inclined to do sometimes if they're under duress still,
Mhm.
but we want to still make it safe for them to be truly who they are and tell us what's really going on.
Mhm.
Right. So,
Mhm. So let's say that we have achieved this awareness state and things are fine in the household. We're not looking at problems on the horizon, but we know that it is developmentally appropriate for our teens to experiment. But we also know that there are certain things that they don't need to experiment with because experimentation can lead to other things. How do we parent or provide an atmosphere that would dissuade them from the experimentation?
some of the most important things we can do early on are watch films and talk about what's happening with our teens afterward.
Mhm.
If we're watching a film where people are drinking, and it's as if it's just so normal for everybody to just celebrate with drinking and getting drunk, we talk about that and we say, there are real repercussions to that. And we can
Mhm.
talk about benzodiazepines and methamphetamines. A lot of people don't know that for teenage girls, especially because they have hormonal issues that are different from teenage boys, it's easier for them to become addicted to stimulants and methamphetamines because of the dopamine levels. And so we
Mhm.
want to talk about those kinds of things casually at the dinner table, or in just a brief discussion, without having a sit down, we're having a family meeting about drug use and substance use prevention. We want this to be casual and normal to talk about this, just like on your show a few weeks ago when you said, let's talk about sex casually, let's talk about porn, so that it's
Mhm.
already a subject in the family. And,
Mhm.
and so, in answer to your question, we can help our teens prevent situations that they might get themselves in by helping them imagine them before they even happen. And when we come up with maybe scenarios and we say, hey, one of my friend's daughters went to this party and she said she was going to just be the designated driver and she thought she was just going to drive everybody home, but she ended up trying some stuff and she ended up being the one that got the most drunk, and they ended up putting her in a separate room and trying to let her sleep that off. And she ended up dying. And, that's what a lot of teens do. They think, oh, let's just sleep something off. But this young girl was really, really over the top and had used a number of things. So we talk about that kind of thing can happen. And instead of trying to hide situations that may look dangerous or bad, reach out for help. And so we bring these kinds of topics into our family discussions so that they are aware. Don't ever do that, and don't ever think that can't happen to you. Yeah. And instead, reach out for help. Say, my mom wanted me to be home at 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. or whatever. So I can't stay that long. I got to get home.
Yeah.
Whatever. Mm-hmm.
So if you watched the show yesterday, you know that one of my parenting issues is I'm very poor at empathetic listening. I'm trying, and when I get it right, I try to celebrate. But using your example, I had one son who is, we don't give them cars, but they use ours. And it was wonderful when he said, when he could use the excuse, I can't do that because I'm driving my mom's car and she'll kill me. She loves her car. Yes. And it was a real simple, relatable thing that he could say. And then another time I've had, you wait up for them to come in. We take turns waiting up, and I could see that something was off. So I just kind of stayed, like this in the living room, watching the son have a snack after coming home after the party. And finally, as he relaxed and I didn't shoot questions, he told me the party was a mess, that somebody had an excess amount of alcohol. They had to call the fire department. It was a whole thing. But I don't think I would have gotten that if I had, you don't look good. What's wrong? Tell me. But rather I said, oh, I'm watching this movie. Sit down and watch it with me at like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yes. But that's brilliant, Kamara, because you did what we talked about. You paused and you noticed your own emotions, right? It sounds like you were feeling a little bit anxious, but you held space receptively, empathically. So that empathy is beautiful. And most of us want to be able to be more empathetic so that our teens will open up and offer information rather than having to answer questions, which, as most of us know, if we ask a pointed question, they may give us a very short answer. Yeah. But if we just make space, show empathy, show kindness, feel compassion for ourselves in that situation first, that we're anxious and we're a little nervous, that can help us calm our emotions. We can breathe, and then our teens might just open up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I like what you said about the information you gave us about the dopamine levels. And I like what you said about pointed questions, which leads me to, I'm going to change tacks and not ask you pointed questions, because you gave me a lot of information and you literally wrote the book on the subject and you do the work. So I'm going to let you just tell us, using your information and what it is that you think we need to know as parents and caregivers of tweens and teens. What is it that we need to know in our quest for preventing them from using substances?
Most of us feel a combination of empowerment and powerlessness. We feel like we know we have some tools and skills under our belts as parents, but a lot of us feel this kind of helplessness, right? We don't know what to do to prevent. So with that knowledge of our sense of powerlessness combined with what we do know, we can tap into, I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to work on me. I'm going to be aware that when I feel helpless, I can go to myself to find control rather than trying to control the situation or control our teen. That's a flaw that I have made. I've made that mistake many times. When I feel out of control, I want to control my teenager, but they can't stand that and they pick up on it immediately and it shuts them down. So instead, when I feel a little bit out of control, and I mean, just in a moment, like, gosh, that person they're hanging out with here at my house looks like they are high, and they don't just look like they're high on weed. They look like they're high on something else. I'm feeling really, really anxious, really fearful. What do I do? First, I go within and I take conscious breaths. And I go through a bunch of these concepts in my book, Conscious Bravery. One of the first ones is to befriend our feelings as well, all of our feelings. So even if we're saying, gosh, why did I even let tell them that they could have that person over at my house, and we're beating ourselves up at the moment, we stop, breathe consciously into that discomfort and maybe guilt, because guilt and shame are two of the most painful emotions, right? For our listeners, it's really hard for us to move past shame or guilt if we've made mistakes in the past. So we pause in the moment, and then sometimes we realize on the continuum of how many options we have, we can make a slightly different choice, and we can change our minds. So say our teens have someone over that we're uncomfortable with, we can say, my plans have changed, and I need to take your friend home, or something like that. I'm not saying that's an easy solution, but I'm just suggesting that we have a right to change our minds if we become aware of what's needed. And so that's one of the points I make in the chapter on befriending our feelings. We don't want to just befriend our feelings just for the heck of it. We don't want to just make friends with not just the happy and sad, but we want to know when we're uncomfortable, know when we feel guilt, so that we can operate differently and have more of a sense of that control we long for. We can control ourselves. We can do something different. And there's a chapter in my book called Now There's This. So a lot of the research that I support, the current research on the neurobiology and the way we rewire our brains and our behaviors, has to do with being present right here, right now, not living in the past, not fearing the future, even though we might have a tendency to do both. We can be aware of that, but coming into this present moment and saying, now this is happening. Now there's this. Breathe consciously. What will I do? We might ask for help. We might pause and be still, like you were, Kamara, and be quiet. I oftentimes say that bravery isn't always tough as nails, and it doesn't always leap in to save the day. Sometimes bravery sounds like softness and looks like stillness. And that receptive space can help us know what to do as parents, and it can help our teens. And this is the research too. So I don't know if you have another question about any of that. I kind of launched into a lot of things. Oh, I can't hear you.
We have a comment from Jessica. Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes.
So Jessica says harm reduction discussions are so important. They also need to know what to do if they see or experience substance-related issues. And she gives us a resource. And I know that our Jessica behind the scenes, the amazing Jessica, has some resources that she's going to put up in the comment section that people should look for. But let's talk about harm reduction discussions.
Yes, I'm so glad that you're putting that comment in for us. Thank you so much, because another book that I'll point everyone toward, this is fairly new research, The Biology of Desire, because substance use issues are a pleasure problem, a pleasure and reward problem. Addiction is a brain disorder and a disease. It's not like it's a character flaw. And so the biology of desire talks, this gentleman, Mark Lewis, was addicted to methamphetamines and all kinds of other things. And he learned, and he became a neuroscientist, that there is this brain flip where our brains start to not serve us well. The very part of us that we need to assist us and aid us in decision making has been hijacked. So that's what happens with addiction. And so it's not a one size fits all approach to preventing substance use or to helping someone into recovery. There are so many paths to help our teens become aware of substance use and make other choices and lay down foundations for themselves so that they are involved in sports and music and have healthy friends who don't use, because I'm bunny trailing, but deliberately, so that our teens can remember that, oh gosh, I have this other friend that doesn't smoke weed and doesn't use anything. And, I think I'm going to hang out with them this weekend because that just feels right. Whereas they may have a friend that smokes a lot of weed and is really bored and they want to help them because they're very caring, but they might start putting themselves first in a boundaried sort of way and saying, that's just not good for me right now. Right now, I need to hang out with people who aren't using any substances. So that's a way of looking at prevention. And it's also a way of looking at, and I'm bunny trailing back to addiction. If you do walk alongside someone or love an older teenager or a young adult, and you're listening on this show, someone who struggles with full-blown addiction, know that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to their recovery, and maybe read different kinds of materials. I really do encourage this book and some of the other things that Kamara is putting up on this site today that will help, in addition to my book, will help folks to know that really what we do is just as important as what they do. If we ask for help and get therapy for ourselves and have a relationship, a wellness approach to therapy, where it's not just we're turning to therapy during a crisis. We've already established that therapy is a part of our lives when we need it, and we see it as helpful for our well-being. Then our teens will feel more open to going to a therapist, or those who we walk alongside who struggle in the wilderness of addiction and mental health issues, they'll be more approachable. They'll be more easily desirous of wanting to go to a program or talk to a therapist.
Thank you. I'm wondering if there are some more practical tips that we can give parents and caregivers. You mentioned having an open relationship, listening, the importance of our children engaging in extracurriculars that keep them busy and give them goals. Anything else?
Yes, I love this question. Having that relationship with our kids is so important, so that we don't have that tendency, if it is our tendency, to helicopter over them, so that we have some ease in our relationship with them. We play ping pong with them. We go to mini golf with them. And those are the kinds of places and those are the kinds of activities where they're likely to open up and just offer something, right? As we're walking around playing mini golf, they might tell us a little bit about what's really going on in their lives. And so the relationship that we have with our teens is probably the absolute most important way we can prevent their substance use. But I do want to say that I hate to say this, but it's true. Many people will become addicted and there's nothing we can do about it. And so I say that in care and compassion because it's not our fault. If our child ends up drinking at a really early age, maybe even before they're a teen, some people have a propensity to take first drinks and to just feel like they can't stop. I have several friends who are in recovery for whom that's true. And so we don't want to feel like it's our fault if our older teen or 20-something has become addicted. Lots of times there are precursors to that, genetics and age of use and the substance they tried and so that sort of thing, and why they used it, if it was during trauma. But at any rate, going back to practical tips, the relationship, even if our teens are already struggling, we want to come back to the relationship and become more aware of how we can connect, how we can show empathy and be compassionate, because we want to do both, be both assertive with our kindness and our help that we offer. They might need a treatment program or something structured, but we also want to be compassionate and empathetic. And so that's a practical tip, basically to unteach ourselves, as you were doing earlier, Kamara, what we were taught. If we were taught to come in strongly and assertively and say, all right, well, this has got to stop, then maybe we take a step back and notice that's our tendency, get some therapy ourselves or some life coaching, and work on how to make ourselves receptive to our teens, how to make it safe for them to open up and talk to us, maybe do some family therapy. You can tell I'm really encouraging therapy, but it's all about awareness. And we want to spend time with them doing things that heighten awareness, like being in nature on a hike. You're tapping into the trees and the sky, and our awareness already heightens. And so that's really great ground for building the relationship with our youth.
I know it seems simple and we hear it a lot, but it's proven true that if we do these things as families, even if it's one on one, if we encourage these things, that it helps. And if you see that your teen used to do something, maybe bike riding, and they haven't been doing it lately, maybe if you encourage them to do it, they'll come back and say, "Thank you. I forgot how much I like that."
Absolutely. Yes. And in a loving way, not like, you used to ride your bike a lot. Why aren't you doing that anymore? More like, gosh, you haven't ridden your bike for a while. You used to really come home and feel that endorphin lift after riding your bike. And maybe just leave it at that without the extra prompt. How about you ride your bike today? Because, we can leave that last part off and let them make that decision. And that's a really important part of prevention as well, Kamara, and all of our listeners, to help our teens know that they can learn from their own mistakes, and they can have the capacity themselves, the agency themselves to make choices. So if they have maybe quit the lacrosse team or whatever, and they used to find a lot of joy from moving their bodies, maybe we say, you used to find a lot of joy when you would come home from practice. Since you don't want to do that anymore, is there something else you want to do? Anything, and ask them if they want to get into dance or hip hop or anything, something that we have an idea of that they may be mentioned on the side at some point, and encourage that so that they can know, oh, I can have the agency to make a new choice and to make a small change in my life. Because those small steps in their lives are oftentimes what they need, right? Because they go from these kids to these preteens and then to these teenagers, and they're changing so fast and we can hardly keep up with them. So it is so important for us to become adaptable and change ourselves and flow with their changes, but also flow with our own, become more adaptable. Becoming more adaptable ourselves helps us to become more resilient, and then they can become more resilient. And post-pandemic, going back to what you said, try something new. Maybe they were isolated for 2 years, right? Maybe it's time to say, okay, I'm a little bit socially anxious about getting out and doing more things. What can I do that's kind of a stepping stone into that? Something where I won't see big groups of people, but I can hang with 3 or 4 people.
And I'll repeat, if you are doing this yourself as the adult in this situation, communicate it with your child, your teen or tween. It's okay for them to know that you gained 20 pounds during the pandemic, so you're eating healthier and less and moving more in order to deal with that. Let them know that you're doing that, or that you do feel a little anxious going into social situations now, and so you're weaning yourself into only the outdoor ones or something. But let them know that that's what you're doing, because they may not make the same choice, because as you said, they should be making their own choices, but they will model the fact that you make a conscious choice, that's how you support yourself.
Beautiful. Role model, making a conscious choice. And so you're speaking to something that everybody wants to hear about. We all want to be happier. We all want happiness. Happiness is cultivated. And I teach that bravery is cultivated. We all have the seeds of bravery. We're born with those, just like we're born with the seeds of love, but we're not a naturally really loving person necessarily. We have to learn how to cultivate being a good friend and being loving when it's tough. Similarly, we want to learn how to be brave in a variety of different ways in different situations, and have a repertoire of different tools and practices for conscious bravery under our belts. Similarly, for happiness, to not just turn to one thing as the end all be all that helps us to be happy. Happiness is a commitment, and it's a vibrancy that we arrive at because we return to happiness even in tough moments. So even when I've been the most devastated, in some of the situations my sons have been the most shocking, sometimes for comic relief, my husband and I will just say something that we think is funny and kind of laugh for a moment, and that comic relief it is, everyone knows that comic relief helps, even in Star Wars, Harrison Ford would say, what was that phrase he would say? I feel like something's wrong here, or,
I should know.
I got a bad feeling about this, and it brought a little comic relief. So, if we say, I got a bad feeling about this, it might help us as parents to lighten a little bit and to know that we can have a foundation of contentment because we can still laugh a little bit, even during the most trying times. And we can stand on that ground of contentment and return to it. It's not like we get completely tipped over by circumstances or the pandemic or global situations, things that are activating all of us. Those things don't have to knock us down and keep us down. We can be kind of like a weeble that wobbles ourselves back up, and return to our happiness. And that's one of the best gifts that we as parents can offer our teens, is to be happy ourselves. And we forget that that's true, right, Kamara? And listeners, we forget that they want to see a parent who is standing tall and strong like a tall tree. They don't want to see us floundering and anxious and fearful and worried and frantic. And I mean, that's hard energy to be around.
Yeah.
Right. So we want to have vibrancy ourselves.
I love this because when you ask parents what they want for their children, no matter what age their children are, they say they want them to be happy. And you say happiness is cultivated, happiness is a commitment. And I really appreciate it. I think that's a perfect place to end. If we can do these things, we're working towards happiness and helping them find their own happiness by modeling ours.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that the tips were helpful for those who are watching. There are a lot of links for you for detailed information, so please access those. No matter where you are on your journey, whether you're trying to prevent substance use or you know that there's substance use in your household, please access the link. Know that you're not alone, and know that we have other resources on our website. You can go to yourteen.com and you'll find other resources. Thanks again, Pamela. I want to remind our audience of two things. Tomorrow night evening, we have a webinar, Wednesday, the 24th at 8 p.m., and it is dealing with middle school. Why is middle school so tough, and what can you do to help your child thrive? If you've raised children or had anything to do with schools, K through 12 schools, you know that middle school period is hard. It is very difficult. So we have an expert who's coming on. It's going to help you with dealing with that and helping your teens thrive through that period. And she will be answering questions. You do have to register. The registration is in the comment section. If you cannot make it at 8 p.m. tomorrow, still register because you will receive a replay. The other thing is that, of course, on Thursday, we have the Inside Scoop with Stu. Inside Scoop with Sue, and she will have another guest on, but you don't have to register for that. You do have to register for tomorrow night's webinar, the middle school webinar. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.